Hello and welcome to Mr. Manley History Teacher's latest video on how to answer the Explain the Significance style question, which is part of the Health and the People AQA GCSE paper. Let's have a look at some of the top tips on how to answer this type of question. So first of all, you need to really concentrate and focus on the word significance, because not only can something be significant for being important at that particular time, but you also need to think about in this type of question why the event or the person that you're being asked about has an impact or has had an impact over the long term as well. So not just at the time that person was around or the event happened, but also the preceding years after that event, or the person has had an impact on medicine in some particular way. So you need to think about the years after the person or event has happened. You need to try and give two reasons why the person or event was significant, and in terms of why that person or event had an impact on medicine or health. And then in terms of timing for this type of question, you should look to spend about 10 minutes to answer this particular question. Now let's have a look at a model answer for the Explain the Significance question. Okay, so here we have a typical Explain the Significance question, and the question is explain the significance of the liberal social reforms for the prevention of disease. Now, there was a liberal government running Britain at the start of the 20th century, and they undertook certain actions and put in place certain policies to try and improve the health of different sections of society in Britain at the start of the 20th century. So that's what we really need to focus on to answer this type of question. Don't forget, we've got that keyword here, significance. So we need to think about the significance of those changes at the time, but also in the years after the early 20th century. And the main knowledge area, so what we need to know about in order to answer this question, are the liberal social reforms that I've mentioned. So let's have a look at the first paragraph. One of the most significant changes that the Liberal government introduced in the earlier 20th century were the school-based health reforms in 1907 and 1908. So straight away there, we're addressing the question by writing that keyword significant or significance in the first sentence. As a result of children being given medical inspections and some being given free school meals, the mortality rate of young children started to improve. So here we're already identifying a significant aspect of a reform that the Liberal government implemented. By having a healthier and more substantial diet, children's immune system started to improve. So here we're linking the reforms to prevention of disease, which is what we're being asked about again in the question. And with children's immune systems improving, they're less likely to get a disease. So we're again addressing the question in our answer here. This was noteworthy as it led to half the number of children dying before their first birthday in Britain in 1920 to what it had been at the start of the 20th century. So at the start of the 20th century, 163 children out of every 1,000 children that were born in Britain were dying before their first birthday, but that had dropped to 80 by 1920. So here we're using a nice bit of specific own knowledge to answer. In fact, I'll put that in red because it's a nice bit of own knowledge here. And this is really going to impress the marker and going to help us achieve high marks because we're using specific own knowledge. The long-term impact of this change, so again, relating back to the question, thinking about the significance of the liberal reforms, the long-term impact of this change was that today 4 in 1,000 children die before their first birthday in Britain. So we're identifying a long-term impact of the liberal social reforms. Then, as I mentioned in my top tips, we've got to write 2 paragraphs. So we started off by saying, furthermore, another vital reform that the Liberal government made was the 1911 National Insurance Act. This set up a system where workers had a sum of money deducted from their wages to pay for healthcare and sick pay if needed. As a consequence of this, the health of workers improved as there was greater access to healthcare and a reduction in illnesses from disease. So again, we're addressing the question in this part of our answer. This had an abiding effect on workers' health and eventually helped lead to the creation of the welfare state and the NHS at the end of the Second World War. So here again, we're referencing the long-term impact of a liberal reform. Now, in order to really get the highest possible marks, so 7 or 8 marks out of 8 for this type of question, not only do we need to identify the long-term significance of changes made by the Liberal government or by events or people at this particular time, but it's also useful as well just to not necessarily write a conclusion, but just to give a judgment, a short judgment at the end of your answer, identifying which change or which event or which person had the most significance. So here I've said overall I think that the school health reforms were the most significant change that took effect, as children were more vital for the country than, and I guess the sort of children growing up and being able to make adulthood and survive until adulthood was more profound than the impact the National Insurance Act had. So a judgment just at the end of your answer like this, where you're analysing and evaluating both the factors that you've written about in the first part of your answer, will help you achieve a higher mark for this type of question. So just to recap those top tips one more time for this type of question. So think about the word significance. Don't just think about the significance at that particular time, but also the significance of that event or that person over a longer period of time. Don't forget to write 2 paragraphs and give 2 reasons as to why the person or event had an impact on medicine or health, and timing for this type of question. In this paper, timing is really important. You need to make sure you stick to the time frame for each type of question as best you can, and you should look to spend about 10 minutes on this type of question. I hope the video helps. Click on the like button and subscribe to my page, Mr. Manley History Teacher.